Here's what's coming up tonight on Inside City Hall.
Beginning this fall, we will provide 2,000 free childcare seats for 2-year-olds in 4 different parts of our city.
Mayor Mamdani was joined by Governor Hochul to announce the expansion of free childcare for 2-year-olds. We'll bring you the details.
Donald Trump has unconstitutionally and illegally chosen to launch a war.
Members of Congress were briefed today by White House officials about the expanding military operations in the Middle East. I'll talk about that and about the War Powers Resolution scheduled for a vote in the House of Representatives when I'm joined by Democratic Congressman Pat Ryan. Also tonight, we'll take a look at the history behind the decades-long Sunnyside Yard project in Queens, which the mayor is seeking to resurrect. We'll talk about it with Alicia Glenn, who spearheaded the latest proposal under the de Blasio administration. For the best news, debate, and analysis of New York politics, join us inside City Hall. Good evening. Welcome to Inside City Hall for Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. I'm Errol Lewis. Neighborhoods in 4 of the 5 boroughs were announced today as the first test sites for the state's new child care program for 2-year-olds. It's also a continuation of Mayor Zohran Mamdani and Governor Kathy Hochul's united front. And while the governor said that the state intends to pick up the bill for the first 2 years, she declined to explain how New Yorkers will pay for the program in later years. Our State House reporter Bernadette Hogan joins me now with tonight's top story. Good evening, Bern.
Good evening, Errol. And although this was a big announcement for the governor and the mayor, the state legislature still has to approve this funding in the upcoming state budget.
We are launching free childcare for 2-year-olds.
Revealing which lucky neighborhoods are on track to get free childcare programs for 2-year-olds next fall.
They're the ones that are relying on us, the adults, to do something that those before had not done.
School districts in the Bronx, including the Riverdale and East Tremont neighborhoods, Washington Heights and Inwood in Upper Manhattan, Ozone Park and the Rockaways in Queens, and Brooklyn's Canarsie and Brownsville will open up 2,000 new seats next September to city kids already 2 years old by the first day of school.
This commitment to universal childcare has the potential to supercharge our economy. We will support and grow our workforce. We will grow our tax revenue, and we will grow as a city.
One top official explained the selection.
We wanted to look at demand for childcare, places where we know families don't have access to other sorts of low-cost, affordable, or subsidized care for their 2-year-olds, and then readiness to expand.
Requesting applications from child care facility operators and private home-based caretakers interested in running those programs.
Many have been operating as private providers, charging families private fees, and we know that for families that's increasingly unaffordable in the city.
Mamdani says he wants to include Staten Islanders by 2027.
Then by the end of year 4, it's every single 2-year-old in the city of New York.
But an outraged Staten Island Borough President Vito Fossella said in a statement, quote, "We have young, hardworking families here, just like any other borough." Continuing, "It's just one more unfortunate reminder that not only are we a forgotten borough, but now even our children are forgotten."
And I'm very upset because Staten Island wasn't included on this program. My kids are bigger, but my neighbors, they have a lot of kids, and we love kids.
The state so far is budgeting $425 million to cover up to 12,000 city-based seats over 2 years. But the governor wouldn't say where the money would come from in future years.
We've done such a good job managing our budget that we're able to provide this new program in an enhanced way.
Hochul disagrees with the mayor's desire to raise taxes on the rich and businesses, which he says would help pay for continued child care.
I said we did it with existing revenues. No, I said we can do it with existing revenues. Take what I'm saying as your answer. You got your answer.
And that was the governor at the end responding to a question about whether or not she would consider raising taxes either on the wealthiest or on corporations to pay for specific programs like this in future years. Of course, she did not want to talk about that, Errol.
Well, there's no way to make this sustainable, meaning whatever it is that parents
Right.
are paying, it's not going to cover the cost of the program.
Right, exactly, which is why the state right now is going to be footing the bill for the next 2 years. It remains to be seen whether or not the city will put in any money either. I mean, Mayor Mamdani has already pitched his own budget, and he said that he can't really do much without taxes raised on the wealthiest or on corporations to even fill the city's current budget holes.
Okay, thanks very much, Bernadette. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. tonight, members of the Senate and the House were just briefed about the ongoing U.S. military operations in Iran. Our Washington, D.C. reporter Shannon Ryan joins me now from inside the Capitol. Good evening, Shannon. And what are you hearing from the New York members?
Hey there, Errol. Good evening to you. Well, as expected, I would say that reactions here are pretty much split along party lines. So you have Republicans standing largely with the president, saying they believe that these strikes were justified, whereas you have Democrats saying that they're not. So I think the big question here, of course, is Israel. Across the board, we're seeing lawmakers say that they do believe there may have been an imminent threat to Israel. Now, what you're hearing Democrats say is that that becomes a bit of a gray area. Israel and the U.S. are obviously allies. So the Trump administration has argued that any strike on Israel would result in a strike in the U.S. and that we had to strike first. Additionally, there's a big rift when it comes to nuclear capabilities. So again, across the board, everybody seems to agree that they had not yet developed nuclear weapons in Iran. However, the Trump administration and most Republicans standing with them say that they were close enough where if we allowed them to continue developing those weapons, we would reach the point of no return. Democrats, however, say, look, they didn't have nuclear weapons. There was no imminent threat. This wasn't justified. We're also seeing a lot of concern regarding this becoming a protracted conflict, complaints that perhaps the objectives here are not clearly outlined. Here's what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told us about that earlier today.
The answers are very unsatisfying. They have shifting goals, different goals all the time, different answers every day. And I am truly worried about mission creep. When there's no set plan, when you can't hear day after day, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and these are the reasons why, you end up with an endless war. You end up with mission creep. You end up with all kinds of problems.
So Democrats are obviously upset. We're going to see a vote on a war powers resolution tomorrow and Thursday in both the House and the Senate, Errol. And what that means is if it were to pass, essentially it would require congressional approval for the president to take further action in Iran. However, it's not going to pass. Republicans, of course, have the majority right now. And even if it does pass out of both the House and the Senate, the president would just veto it. And we're not expecting to see the number of votes for that veto to be overridden. So I guess the question then becomes, why still proceed with this? That's something that Leader Jeffries was asked earlier today. Take a listen.
It's important for us to take the step that is in front of us right now, which is to work to make sure that the War Powers Resolution, which is bipartisan in nature, passes on the House floor today. Every member of Congress needs to go on record. This is a matter of the utmost significance that the framers understood would perhaps be the most important decision that members of Congress would make.
Errol, certainly really interesting words from Leader Jeffries there. You're seeing strikes in at least half a dozen Middle Eastern countries right now. And you hear one of the most powerful Democrats saying the actions he's taking as he opposes this war are largely symbolic at this point. So I asked several members of the New York delegation about that. Do they feel like leadership has been weak on this, like that's an adequate step to be taking? And everybody told me that they support it, that they would do the same and that they don't see the alternative, which I think really underscores just how hamstrung Democrats are here, Errol.
Okay, thanks very much, Shannon. It is time now for a break. Coming up, Republicans are celebrating a key victory after the U.S. Supreme Court blocked the redrawing of New York's 11th Congressional District, which covers all of Staten Island and part of South Brooklyn. We'll explain in 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Every day tells a new story. At Mornings on One, we're dedicated to bringing you the stories that matter most to start your day. With in-depth coverage of the day's news.
I'm Pat Kernan. Here are the stories we're following.
And weather updates every 10 minutes.
Tomorrow, some morning sunshine possible. Clouds take over.
It's our responsibility to get you the information you need before you head out the door. Mornings on One. Weekdays starting at 6 on the Spectrum News app. Free for Spectrum and Xfinity customers.
The storm came through with 120-mile-an-hour winds through our neighborhood. My daughter had to evacuate to our house while we were out of town. Sure enough, power goes out. When the generator kicked back on, it, of course, powered the Spectrum modem. She didn't lose service, and we didn't lose connectivity with her through the entire storm. We both breathed a sigh of relief. To have her feel safe and us feel reassured that she was okay was priceless.
Real customers, real reliability. To get the most reliable internet, visit spectrum.com/stay connected.
I'm Sandra, this is Jorge, and we were adopted in 2019. I remember when they first came to us, Michael was already a teenager. The whole cliche of they're so lucky to have you guys, and it's the other way around. They have changed our family for the better. They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Going into the 2026 election, local races will determine national policy, from the economy to public safety. From the governor's race to the balance of power in Washington, this year's ballot has no shortage of important choices. Let Spectrum News New York One be your resource for balanced, up-to-date coverage and analysis, so you can know what the issues are and how they impact your community. Always dedicated, always local, always on. Decision 2026 on Spectrum News New York One. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. As we reported last night, New York's House district map is set and will not be changed for this year's election. The U.S. Supreme Court halted a Democratic effort to redraw the one Republican-held district in New York City, the 11th district, which covers all of Staten Island and part of southern Brooklyn. Our Dan Rivoli has been following the case and joins me now with reaction. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening, Errol. So we know Nicole Malliotakis, the Congresswoman, is pleased with this decision. And while she was in Washington, D.C., Staten Island Republicans gathered earlier today to thank the Supreme Court and saying that the move from the justices shows this was a political ploy from Democrats all along.
Thanks to the United States Supreme Court, the voice of Staten Islanders will not be diminished in the upcoming election.
Staten Island Republicans feeling vindicated. The U.S. Supreme Court Monday evening stopped a New York judicial order that could have seen the borough's GOP-held House district dismantled. Michael Tannousis, a state lawmaker, is chair of the Staten Island GOP.
This is nothing more than an attempt to diminish the voice of Staten Island voters.
The conservative majority on the Supreme Court blocked a New York court ruling that found New York 11, covering Staten Island and Brooklyn, disenfranchised Black and Hispanic voters and ordered a new district drawn so minority voters could elect a candidate of their choice. Republicans argued that this was a guise for Democrats to hide a partisan power grab by redrawing the district with more liberal voters in order to defeat incumbent GOP Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis.
It is nothing more than a move to attempt to make sure that a Republican is not represented in this seat.
Justice Samuel Alito, in a concurrence, argued that the New York court's order blatantly discriminates on the basis of race and is unadorned racial discrimination that violates the U.S. Constitution.
Justice Alito clearly is signaling his dissatisfaction with the use of race in voting rights matters.
Even though the district map stays the same this year, the parties can continue litigating this in state court. Clearly, Justice Alito finds this original order unconstitutional. He wrote as such in the concurrence.
He did, and he spoke for himself. No one else joined him.
Meaning it is unclear if there's a majority of justices who agree with Alito. For now, though, the campaign for the House can continue as planned.
The first course of action is to make sure that Nicole Malliotakis is elected the Congresswoman of this district.
The law firm of Democratic attorney Mark Elias brought the original lawsuit. A spokesman for the law firm declined to comment as the attorneys assess the next steps, Errol.
So it sounds like the next steps will be that the lawsuit will continue, even though the district doesn't change, the election will happen, and some point in the future, well after the election, the lawsuit may actually end up in the state's highest court, perhaps even get a second trip to the Supreme Court.
That's right, because once this trial court decision came out, the appeals were fast and furious and arguing for an emergency stay. So the appeals were never litigated on the merits, so it can keep going through the state courts now, maybe even go back to the U.S. Supreme Court. But of course, we do know at least one justice thinks the lower court decision was unconstitutional.
And up till this point, was there a strong Democratic challenger who was going to run against Nicole Malliotakis?
No, there was a school teacher, an educator who was running, didn't hold elected office, and I think if the Democrats were successful and this was redistricted, you could perhaps have a lower Manhattan neighborhood added. Dan Goldman could have been stumping for votes on Staten Island, or an elected Democrat on the borough could have made a real run.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot, Dan. Meanwhile, the City Council's Standards and Ethics Committee voted to charge Councilmember Vicky Palladino over a recent social media post. Our Kelly Mena has been following this story and joins us with the details. Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Errol. And the subcommittee made that decision on Monday at a closed-door meeting. They specifically are charging Councilwoman Vicky Palladino with, quote, acting against council discrimination policies and creating a hostile work environment. At issue are Palladino's Islamophobic social media posts, including one from December where she called for the, quote, expulsion of Muslims from Western nations, among other comments. Now, Speaker Julie Menon was on New York One last week and had this to say about the proceedings ahead of that subcommittee vote on Monday.
There are a range of options that the committee has under our rules. And so it's the committee's jurisdiction. It can be everything from a reprimand to censure to training to, and it ratchets up from there. We can't have a situation where we have a very strict harassment policy in the City Council. We can't have violations of that. Our harassment policy includes social media.
And one of the outcomes that could also, after this process plays out, could also lead to an expulsion. That would be the worst outcome for the Republican councilwoman. Either of any of those outcomes would need 2/3 of the 51 council member body to approve it. Now, Vicky Palladino will have 5 days to respond now to these charges against her, and then she will get a chance to defend herself in a public closed door, or excuse me, in a private closed door meeting in front of the subcommittee to then plead out her case. We have reached out to her and we have not heard back, but last week she did defend her comments on X, saying in a post that as an elected official and an American, she has an absolute First Amendment right to speak on these matters of public policy in any way she sees fit, period, is what she said in that post. And I did hear from sources on that subcommittee that this is not about First Amendment rights, but about making sure that council members are acting in accordance to the policies of the council, Errol.
Right, there's a couple of things going on. I mean, she has said that it's free speech, and everybody understands that, you know, free speech includes offensive speech at times. On the other hand, this is a workplace, right? And there are a lot of Muslim staff members at the city council who probably feel a particular kind of way when one of the senior members, somebody like her, is saying that they should be thrown out of the country.
Yeah, and problematic. I mean, and she, there's other claims that she retweets other more egregious social media posts that are, you know, Islamophobic, call out Muslim, call out religion, call out Islam. And because of those reasons, that's why the city council speaker, now the city council speaker, Julie Menon, actually referred this issue to the subcommittee and had them meet this week to continue this process. In December, the subcommittee had voted to start an investigation into those X posts and other posts that she made. So this is kind of the second step in that process. It will depend how this plays out, what the outcome will be, but it could be very serious for her, especially right now.
Okay, thanks very much, Kelly. We are going to take a short break now. When we come back, with the city now led by its first Muslim mayor, some Muslim New Yorkers say they feel more accepted and empowered than in the years past, especially after the September 11th attacks. We'll explain that in 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please. There's nothing quite like the feeling of going to the theater. Onstage celebrates that excitement every week by taking you behind the scenes with the latest news and in-depth interviews of the hottest shows on and off Broadway. So grab a seat, because this is a show you won't want to miss. Join us every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. for Onstage.
Onstage is presented by your Tri-State Cadillac dealers. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate your journey.
I had a heart attack about 1.5 years ago, and so now I have an ICD implant that needs stable and reliable internet to give routine checks and daily reports to my cardiologist. When my cardiologist told me he wasn't getting the information he needed, me and my fiance looked into better internet providers, and we found Spectrum. As soon as we switched, he said he saw every daily report, every routine check that they did. It made us feel like we were back in control of my life.
Real customers, real reliability. To get the most reliable internet, visit Spectrum.com.
Mom was always organized, but she started forgetting to pay her bills on time.
And she'd buy the same gifts over and over.
Telling the girls about my Alzheimer's diagnosis was really hard.
At first, we had our cries, but then we were like, okay, let's make a plan.
Early detection gave us time to adapt together.
It's so important for you to think about what you can do and making the most of what you have.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
From my time growing up in Queens, watching New York One, to my time reporting here, I've seen how quickly a story can change. At News All Day, we bring you the news as it's happening, from around the boroughs to local government to your neighborhood. Because our city never stops moving.
Hi, I'm Shannon Ferry with the day's developing stories. But first,
stay up to date and informed with News All Day, weekdays from noon to 4.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. In the immediate aftermath of September 11th, some Muslim New Yorkers faced discrimination and Islamophobia, and it continued for years. Now, with Mamdani as the first Muslim mayor to lead our city, some have dubbed this a new era for New York, one in which Muslims are far more accepted than ever before. Our Nurulin Kawaja has this report on one Muslim New Yorker who believes that the past helped shape the present.
This is one of the town halls we did.
Memories of a post-9/11 New York remind Fahad Ahmed of darker times in the city.
It brings up a lot of intensity of the hurt from that period because we had to carry the hurt for the families as well.
Muslim families across the city who had loved ones detained and jailed in post-9/11 sweeps.
We had families that would call our hotline, women that would say that police bust down the door and grabbed my husband and my brother and took them away. Kids saying my father left for work 4 days ago and he hasn't come home and we don't know where he is.
Ahmed, who had a full-time job at New York Presbyterian Hospital, decided to go all in on his activism, helping families get loved ones released from New Jersey jails. As an organizer with DRUM, which stands for Daisy's Rising Up and Moving, a community social justice organization based in Jackson Heights, Queens. The city said at the time its surveillance of Muslims was needed to keep the city safe.
None of these people had anything to do with issues of national security. And so then we saw a shift to where law enforcement, rather than picking people up en masse, started to send in informants and undercovers into the community to surveil on them.
Ahmed says law enforcement put him under surveillance as well, explaining the FBI and the NYPD raided his Flatbush apartment 3 times. And he says the NYPD kept a close watch on DRUM, even sending in an informant to try to join the organization. The NYPD spied on Muslims for more than a decade, from around 2002 to 2014, eavesdropping in cafes and placing informants in student groups, mosques, and political organizations. Then Police Commissioner Ray Kelly insisted at the time the NYPD's efforts were lawful and helped protect the city from terrorist attacks. But in a federal civil rights case in 2012, the NYPD admitted those efforts generated 0 leads.
At that period, anything could be said about Muslims, and it would just go uncontested. protested. The swath of people that would just say anything about Muslims, about Islam, about immigrants was very big. People were afraid. We saw people hiding their language, hiding visible markers of their religiosity. Like, the level of fear was quite widespread.
But he says through hard work, the Muslim community has made great strides in being accepted and trusted again by authorities.
In the aftermath of 9/11, it just felt like the NYPD could do anything it wanted with our communities. And I think less to the credit of the NYPD and more to the credit of our organized communities. I think now they have to be more responsive, more circumspect, and know that they can't just openly and freely abuse our communities. And that's all as a result of continued organizing.
And he believes the progress of Muslims in the city has reached new heights with a Muslim mayor for the first time ever.
It really injected a lot of confidence into our communities on people feeling that they had now the space and the ability to actively assert who they are and recognize that we are part of fabric of New York City and part of the struggles in making this a better city and a better society.
Norlane Kawaja, New York 1.
It is time now for a break. Coming up, congressional lawmakers were briefed by White House officials about the ongoing U.S. strikes against Iran. Congressman Pat Ryan will join me next to talk it all over. Stay with us.
My time at New York 1 has shown me that in the city that never sleeps, the news never stops. So as the day winds down, turn to the rush hour. Good
afternoon, I'm Monica Burke.
To catch up on the stories that matter across the 5 boroughs, with in-depth interviews from the city's newsmakers, plus the latest forecast. Catching you up with today, preparing you for tomorrow. Right here on the Rush Hour. Weekdays from 4 to 7 p.m.
The Nanakuli Valley is the largest Hawaiian community in the state of Hawaii. Because of Spectrum and their investment, Alulike is a place that people can come and access technology. Many of our participants don't have computers at home. We have programs that help students, that help adults get employment. Spectrum gives us the tools to help more people get there.
I'm Chris Jakovic. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakovic, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
At Spectrum Noticias, we recognize that our New York City community is vibrant and diverse.
Spectrum Noticias delivers balanced coverage of the stories that matter in our communities and across the country.
Our journalists are based in the neighborhoods we cover, ensuring you get in-depth reporting on what's happening in the places we call home.
So join us at Spectrum Noticias. We're always on, always there for you.
Now available on your TV. Check your local listings. Also available on the Spectrum News app.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall, where we are turning back to the war with Iran as U.S. combat operations continue for a 4th day. Lawmakers just left a closed-door briefing on the war, including my next guest, who is one of only a few dozen members of Congress who have actually served in the U.S. military. Democratic Congressman Pat Ryan represents parts of the Hudson Valley and served 2 combat tours in Iraq as an Army intelligence officer. He currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
What can you tell us about today's briefing? What did you learn that you might want to share with the audience?
Well, unfortunately, as has been the case on the Venezuela operation as well, more questions than answers. I left more concerned about the lack of clear strategy and frankly, a lot of just deception and trying to run out the clock. This felt like more of a box check, exercise from an administration that just hasn't been transparent from the beginning and continues to do that, which is just such an incredible disservice to all the American people, but especially our brave young men and women that are in harm's way right now.
Well, yeah, I want to ask about the military in a minute. What are we doing, though, Congressman, for American civilians who are currently stranded in the Middle East? I saw estimates of more than 500,000 Americans who now have been told to get out of the region as best they can.
This was one of the questions asked in the briefing, not a satisfactory answer, and essentially a shrug of the shoulders when we said, what was the preemptive planning on this to address that, and there was just not a satisfactory answer given. And it speaks to the larger lack, again, of a clear plan. We've heard 4 or 5 different aims from the president in just 48 hours. And I think very importantly, to me, just a lack of a grasp of the gravity of the situation that unfortunately continues to escalate. And now we've seen 6 Americans' lives taken, and again, statements over and over from the administration. They think there could be more lives lost.
There's support and there's opposition. It falls largely around party lines for the most part, but where do veteran members specifically fall? I mean, I know you've been talking with them. In fact, for all I know, do you have a veterans caucus? Do you guys have a way of maybe trying to pool your expertise and share with your members what it's like to actually be in combat?
We do have a bipartisan Veterans Caucus that I've been a part of since I've been in Congress. We also recently started a Democratic Veterans Caucus. I have tried, both after Venezuela and before this war initiated in Iran and since, to prevail upon my colleagues of both parties, but specifically Republicans, to say, for those of us that served in these open-ended regime change wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, that I think the whole country now agrees were a mistake, that it's up to us to honor the memories of our fallen brothers and sisters from those wars, to not send another generation into harm's way with no clear plan. And I will keep fighting for that to the very last minute before this vote that's scheduled Thursday, but I'm afraid that it's fallen along not even partisan lines, but frankly, lines of just blind fealty to the president, which is, I think, a dereliction of our constitutional duty.
You know, speaking of people in harm's way, I've noticed over the years that whether it's training accidents or friendly fire, that casualties are almost inevitable. You're handling lethal munitions, you're moving them around in a theater of war. Is that inevitable?
Well, certainly when you initiate a war, and let's be clear, this is a full-scale war despite any effort to seek authorization from the Congress as the Constitution requires, I think it is inevitable. I mean, it's an incredibly complex operation. To be clear, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians are doing exceptional work. They're the absolute best. But it is inevitable, and it's tragic. And I think most importantly, this did not need to happen. This is a war of choice. The idea that there was some imminent threat from Iran has been widely disproven, and the American people need to know that, and they need to know that there's a vote on Thursday to stop us from sliding into potentially another forever war in the Middle East.
How do you intend to vote on that war powers resolution?
I'll be voting yes, which means yes in asserting our constitutional prerogative and saying we should not be in this war and that we should bring our soldiers home immediately.
I saw on social media, on X, you had some choice words for Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. There seems to be a lot of frustration that the war that you served in had a lot of similarities to the current conflict. What are those similarities?
Well, I mean, the war in Iraq in particular, we now know was built on a foundation of lies, of shifting justifications, of once we started it not acknowledging that it wasn't going well, continuing to say year after year, just one more year, just more American lives. And I fear that history is, if not repeating, certainly rhyming here. And so when I see someone like Senator Mullen, who in an interview, for example, seemed to imply that he had seen combat himself, which he has not, and he hasn't even served in uniform. When I see these chicken hawks sitting here in D.C. who've never been on the receiving end of an order to go to war, which I've done twice, it pisses me off. Not personally, but on behalf of this next generation of folks serving in uniform who deserve to have advocates here in both parties asking the hard questions, forcing this conversation publicly, and that clearly didn't happen before this. I mean, the president had a chance in an almost 2-hour speech before the nation in the State of the Union to make his case, and he deliberately chose not to do it.
The Trump administration has not committed to sending ground troops into Iran. Can there be regime change? Can there be a victory, however one wants to define it, just through an air campaign, as far as you know?
Well, that first night, the president said his aim was regime change. He was very explicit about that. Throughout all of human history, there's never been a successful regime change. And to be clear, I am not arguing for regime change, but there's never been a successful regime change just by air campaign. It is just not possible, especially in a nation of 93 million people like Iran, with a strong country that has a history of repressing its people and crushing opposition, jailing dissidents. So to think that that's possible just shows how clueless I think the president is. And I think we know he was ignoring concerns being raised by senior military officers about the realistic nature of that aim, about concerns about expending a huge amount of munitions, funds, and ultimately lives in a theater in the Middle East that I think the whole country acknowledges we need to be shifting away from that region, focus on threats in China, Russia, and other adversaries.
Some of your colleagues have suggested that this is all intended to specifically distract public attention from the Epstein files. Is that a conceivable scenario for you?
I think that's an incredibly cynical take. I think this is more about a president who's failing at home, failing in his core promise of his campaign to lower costs of housing, of health care, of groceries, of utilities, realizing he is unpopular and seeking to exert his will and his strength and his ego overseas. We saw that in Venezuela. We're now seeing it in Iran, and I fear we could see it other places. And it is American lives. It is young kids from working class families across this country who are paying the price, while the people making the decisions here in Washington, most of them haven't served, most of them don't have skin in the game with their kids.
Okay. Thank you very much, Congressman Ryan. Thanks for spending some time with us. We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll bring you the history of proposed projects at Sunnyside Yard in Queens, including some history with President Donald Trump himself. Stay with us.
After 30 years of forecasting for New York, I've learned it takes a dedicated team to cover all the weather our city has to offer. As chief meteorologist at New York One, I'm honored to be able to help New Yorkers plan their day.
Morning, noon, or night, our team is here to bring you accurate forecasts you can count on, from severe weather updates to our Weather on the Ones. Watch the New York One weather experts with your Weather on the Ones on your TV and on the go with the Spectrum News app.
I moved from Dallas to Los Angeles all by myself. The order of things I wanted to set up was internet, water, then power. I needed to take a shower, but I really did need the internet for work and to watch my shows. That's kind of a crazy thing to admit in front of a camera. Pretend I didn't say that. I got to Spectrum. I was so relieved that I was getting the best bang for my buck. It was a huge weight taken off of my shoulders.
Real customers, real savings. To see how much you can save, visit spectrum.com/save.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now.
My father was a New York City firefighter. My mission, like his, is to serve New Yorkers in a city that doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Being with New York One since the beginning, I'm now honored to join you even earlier each weeknight. Starting at 8 with New York Tonight, we'll explore the latest news developments, followed by New York One at 10 to wrap up your day. So join me each weeknight starting at 8 right here on New York One.
Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Last week, Mayor Zohran Mamdani pitched President Donald Trump on an ambitious plan to build 12,000 housing units over the Sunnyside Rail Yard in Queens. It's not the first time Trump has shown interest in that site. As a matter of fact, in the 1980s, he considered the possibility of building a football stadium there, one of many lofty visions for the site that never quite got off the ground. Our Bobby Kuza has been looking into the history of the Sunnyside Rail Yard and joins me now with more. Good evening.
Good evening, Errol. And one thing to understand, this is a massive, hugely ambitious project. I mean, these are working rail yards, right? So you'd have to build a deck over them. And it's sort of like Hudson Yards, except it's about 6 times the size of Hudson Yards. So that's the reason that both it has been so desirable, but also it has been so difficult to actually get anything built here. And as we found, kind of digging around through the archives, Donald Trump himself has looked at this site before.
Building over the Sunnyside Yard in Queens has long been a dream of urban planners and politicians. And now Mayor Zohran Mamdani is looking to the White House for help.
The president was interested in the idea.
In fact, President Trump has been interested in the Sunnyside Yard since the early 1980s, when the state's Urban Development Corporation named him to the board of a new body tasked with finding sites for a new sports stadium. Trump, then owner of the New Jersey Generals football team, had already been scouting sites, and according to the New York Times, was said to have focused on a site on the Bronx side of the Bronx Whitestone Bridge, on Flushing Meadows, and on the Penn Central Rail Yards in Sunnyside, Queens. As sports columnist George Vesey later wrote, Donald Trump is casting his eye on the wide-open spaces of the railroad yards in Sunnyside, Queens, as a place to build the Trump Dome. The idea never got off the drawing board, like so many others, dating back almost a century. In 1931, the Regional Plan of New York and its environs declared there is urgent need of improvement of the Sunnyside Terminal District at Queens Plaza in Long Island City. Planners floated the idea of an airfield on the site or a rail hub topped by an office tower.
This is a classic New York situation where almost every decade over the last century you could find a plan by some public agency or civic group or somebody for what to do with this asset.
That included a 1971 proposal featuring 20-story apartment buildings and a mall, and a 1973 proposal by Governor Nelson Rockefeller that included 2 racetracks and a football stadium. Sunnyside Yard was also eyed by Mayor Bloomberg and Dan Doctoroff, his one-time deputy mayor, who pitched a plan for a convention center in 2014, writing in the Times, "The perfect undeveloped location for a new convention center exists at Sunnyside Yards, the more than 160-acre rail yard that carves a nasty scar through the heart of Queens." But it was Mayor Bill de Blasio who breathed real life into the project in 2015.
It's an opportunity to keep our city affordable. I'm referring to Sunnyside Yards.
That immediately became a source of contention with Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Sunnyside Yard specifically is problematic.
You can't have 200 acres available and all the pressures on affordability of the city and not do anything.
De Blasio pushed forward, but concerns over gentrification drove opposition, including from local elected officials like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and then City Councilman Jimmy Van Bramer.
It is almost impossible to see how the neighborhoods surrounding the yards wouldn't be dramatically changed.
I do think the political winds have shifted.
Vishaan Chakrabarty's firm, Practice for Architecture and Urbanism, led the development of a master plan for the site released in 2020. He believes Mamdani can pick up where de Blasio's plan left off.
It's technically incredibly complicated. Starting from scratch is a disaster because, you know, why would you lose all of that knowledge that was built up before? So to me, the fact that previous plans have been done is a good thing.
Mamdani has cited a figure of 12,000 affordable units, which mirrors the 2020 plan. He's seeking some $21 billion in federal funding, and that's just the start of it.
I think the mayor, just by starting this conversation again, is kind of bringing energy and focus to this issue. But I think that nobody should fool themselves and think that this is going to be easy or quick or cheap or anything, because it's none of those.
This is a long-standing project that will also require a long-standing commitment, and we're just at the very beginning of it.
And that master plan I talked about in the piece was released in 2020. And the reason it stalled out is because it was released in March of 2020, right before COVID hit. So it wasn't that the project was killed exactly, it just never got anywhere. And then, of course, we had a new administration, and it took years for the city to get back on its feet. Also worth mentioning, I didn't get into the ownership of the site, but you've got Amtrak, which owns most of the site. The MTA owns part of it. Some of it is privately owned. So there are a lot of complications just in acquiring the air rights there. And that's why you need so many different people on board. And if you've got Trump and Kathy Hochul and Mamdani all on the same page, the stars could potentially be aligned.
Well, and look, the proposal that is, you can find it on the website. It's on the EDC website. They spent 5 years putting it together. It wasn't like a 6-month, you know, kind of sketch project. It was like they talked with lots of community residents. They talked with lots of engineers, architects, and so forth. So they really did kind of build out the notion that this is at least possible.
Right, and yeah, they spent a lot of time holding public meetings, talking to community. There was a lot of pushback, but there was also some support, and they tried to take the community input into consideration. We'll see what happens this time. We already saw Julie Wan, the local councilwoman, last week kind of throwing cold water on this. So you are always going to have some pushback and people who want input into the process. But again, we're talking about decades before this thing could be really entirely built out. I mean, it is so massive, it would have to be done in phases. And all this would get done probably after Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump are long gone.
Right. I like the part about it being an urgent need, according to the Regional Plan Association.
In 1931.
In 1931. We're almost there. Thanks a lot, Bobby. We are going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion about the Sunnyside Yard project with Alicia Glenn, a former Deputy Mayor of Housing and Economic Development under Mayor de Blasio. Stay with us.
We have so many ways to stay connected. A single touch can bring us closer to the families we love, the friends we know, and the city we share. And Spectrum helps us keep connected throughout the day, every day. Including more ways to watch New York One as a Spectrum Internet customer. Watch Spectrum News New York One on the Spectrum News app, available on all your favorite devices.
I don't know if the world knows this, but kids are expensive. And when we found out we were pregnant, of course, we were looking for any ways to slash bills.
And making sure we only had what we needed so that everything was less stressful.
And saving money with our internet bill really helped us out a lot. Came to Spectrum because we were with AT&T before, and Spectrum just had better deals.
That money we saved with Spectrum just added to what we could repurpose for our daughter.
Real customers, real savings. To see how much you can save, visit spectrum.com/save.
Every day tells a new story. At Mornings on One, we're dedicated to bringing you the stories that matter most to start your day. With in-depth coverage of the day's news.
I'm Pat Kernan. Here are the stories we're following.
And weather updates every 10 minutes.
Tomorrow, some morning sunshine possible. Clouds take over.
It's our responsibility to get you the information you need before you head out the door. Mornings on 1. Weekdays starting at 6 on the Spectrum News app. Free for Spectrum and Xfinity customers.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
We are back inside City Hall, keeping our focus on the Sunnyside Yard plan. As we explained earlier, Mayor Mamdani wants to revive an old housing project over a massive rail yard in Queens, a project that would bring 12,000 affordable homes to the area. Joining me to talk more about the plan and its challenges is Alicia Glenn. She's a former deputy mayor for Housing and Economic Development in the de Blasio administration who helped craft the Sunnyside Yard plan, which you can find online. She now runs her own development firm called M Squared, and she's also the co-chair of the Gateway Development Commission. Welcome back to the program. Always good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Well, as we saw, proposals to build on top of the Sunnyside Yards literally go back 95 years, almost 100 years now.
Indeed.
But the engineering problems, the fiscal challenges, and most of all, I think the sort of political kind of jurisdictional fights over all of the different players are what have kept it from moving forward. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ingredients that have caused it to be a very difficult cake to build, if that's the analogy. I think, on the other hand, as we have learned over time how to build over active rail yards, right, we have that experience now. Technology has advanced from 95 years ago. And the rail operators themselves understand, I think, more and more why this is something they should be spending time on and actually trying to help move forward rather than just see it as their yard and their yard only, right, which has essentially just been a gash in the middle of the borough.
When you were doing the feasibility study for Mayor de Blasio, was there an option to come back and say, you know what, I don't think this is going to work? Or was it more like, clearly he wants it to happen, so you have to try and show him how it could be done?
I think you raised an interesting point. I mean, is there too much like you're out of the gate already with the idea? I think we had a very genuine discussion about what were the engineering and sort of political and financial challenges of taking on a project of this size, particularly if you remember in light of it was really coming off of Hudson Yards becoming a thing. And for all of the pros and cons of Hudson Yards, I think that we in the de Blasio administration felt very strongly that we wanted to design a project at scale that would be more human, that would really resonate with what New Yorkers wanted, that could connect neighborhoods, that could provide real affordable housing and schools and culture and education. And so in a way, it was a little bit of a petri dish for everything that we were trying to do there. And I would always caveat, but we can't do this unless the market is strong and or there's a huge public sector investment. Right. And we need the cooperation of a lot of different players. So it was always going to be complicated. And then, of course, the arrival of Donald Trump won. And then, of course, COVID. Right? These are things you can't necessarily control.
Right. Well, yeah, right. You spent many years on the proposal, and it was hundreds of pages, and it was very interesting, and it came out in March of 2020, and a couple of weeks later.
Correct. And the politics, obviously, were changing very radically at that time. When you think about it now, which is why I think it's so interesting and exciting that the mayor has brought it back on the table. At the time, there was also a lot of sort of more generalized NIMBY distrust of development. The Amazon headquarters had just sort of become very much a controversial project just a few neighborhoods away. And I think that it just was very difficult for people to really believe that we could deliver on a project that would serve all New Yorkers.
Was there a scenario, or is there a scenario in which it could be scaled down, meaning just a portion of the yards as opposed to the whole 182 acres?
Yeah, I mean, no matter what happens, even if they're able to, quote, pull this off, it would be phased, right? It is an active rail yard, and that is the #1 thing to make sure transportation is going in and out of the city, because it serves New Yorkers and people across the region. There are definitely ways in which pieces of the yard that are more close to grade, and or when you think about the neighborhoods that are adjacent, you know, Long Island City has already developed unbelievably in the past decade. So to imagine a continuation of that kind of housing and mixed-use development on that side of the yard is very easy. I think when you start thinking about doing the whole yard, it really is a master planning exercise that's going to require a lot of input. But it is one of the rare options for the city to really say, do we want to do home ownership? Do we want to do mixed income housing? What are the real pieces of what makes a new neighborhood for the 21st century? Family housing. Why don't we prioritize families?
Well, but, you know, when it comes to the expense, I mean, it was notable to me. I think the final number on the plan that you completed in 2020 was something in the area of $14 billion. Mamdani is asking the president for $21 billion, which, by the way, comes out to $1.75 million per unit. Yeah, that seems a little rich. But I mean, there are other ways to develop affordable housing if you're talking about tens of billions of dollars, right?
Sure, I think that number is a very crass and sort of gross number. I mean, there's the number that it's going to cost to actually do the infrastructure, right? To make the site developable. And then what goes on above it should be a combination of private investment and public sector investment, right? I mean, I personally don't think that it should be 100% affordable housing. I think we have a unique opportunity to do a real mixed income community and mixed home ownership, which is an increasingly important piece of the puzzle, particularly for working class communities in Queens. And I think mixed income housing continues to be the right, more long-term sustainable model so that we don't continue to have to keep paying the bill for all of these low-income units, and families have better outcomes. So depending on what the programming mix is, we'll know what the bill is. But it is absolutely clear that there's no private sector solution to just building an enormous and very complex platform over this site, unlike Hudson Yards, which, by the way, also had tremendous public support, just not as overt as saying to the President of the United States, I'd like you to write me a check.
Right, right. Well, Hudson Yards and even like Atlantic Yards in Brooklyn, I mean, these are similar conceptually at least, and, you know, deck over the rail yards and let's build some stuff there. And in both cases, they've had enormous controversy, in part because it ends up costing so much more than what was originally projected, right? So,
well, time is money.
Well, but is this, I mean, yeah, right, but time is also where you get consensus, right? So you know.
Well, that's why I'm hoping this might be a little bit different, right? I'm actually going to be an optimist here because I think that the work that we did, you know, 7, 8 years ago is solid work. And I've noticed already in the chatter that some of the folks who were like already very skeptical of the plan at the time are getting on board and saying, no, actually, this is an interesting opportunity for us to do something at scale and to do it in partnership with community. That already is completely different sort of zeitgeist than it was when we started to take on this in 2016 or 2015. So I think that we may not have, a lot of times plans get shelved and you have to start again. I don't think that's the case. I think that there's real willingness now by the city and by stakeholders and by other politicians to sit down and say, you know what, this plan was actually not a bad idea. How do we want to tweak it now to sort of amend some of our priorities? But also we need to get going because if we can make a deal with the federal government to finance some portion of the infrastructure, let me tell you something from Gateway, get that agreement signed.
Right, right, right. Get the check and cash it quickly. Right?
You want those agreements signed because then ultimately they will be enforceable.
How is Gateway looking, by the way?
Well, it's been, as we say, sort of up and down, but the good news is our legal strategy did pay off, and we received a fair amount of our money back, and we were able to put all 1,000 workers back on the job. Because at the end of the day, this project was not just theoretical anymore. There were 1,000 people building this project who were putting food on the table for their kids. And we're back. It's not over yet. We're going to have to keep struggling, and he's a mercurial guy. So it's going to get bumpy.
All right, yeah, move quick while you
exactly.
While you've got the
That's my advice.
Thanks so much for this perspective. Great talking with you. All right, that's going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks for watching and have a great evening. We'll see you next time inside City Hall. Going into the 2026 election, local races will determine national policy, from the economy to public safety. From the governor's race to the balance of power in Washington, this year's ballot has no shortage of important choices. Let Spectrum News New York One be your resource for balanced, up-to-date coverage and analysis, so you can know what the issues are and how they impact your community. Always dedicated, always local, always on. Decision 2026 on Spectrum News New York One.
This is a very special place. It is a place where we like to think we make memories.
We have the capacity for nearly 20,000 people in the arena.
Working at a building like this, you have access to so many resources. It's about utilizing the tools that we have to be able to create those memories for our partners, for our fans, and for anybody who steps into this building. At the end of the game, they're going to leave here feeling like they enjoyed the experience, enjoyed the game, and that's what we're here for.
A venue like this has a lot of moving parts, but at its heart, it has its technology backbone.
Spectrum powers scoreboards, ticketing, point of sales. They also provide a highly secure network that takes care of fan security, security of the Wi-Fi access.